The Caribbean. For many, it's turquoise water, white sand beaches, and cruise ships drifting across the horizon. But today, this region of more than 40 million people sits at the center of a growing geopolitical debate. From oil sanctions targeting Venezuela, to economic pressure on Cuba, to visa concerns affecting Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Lucia, a powerful question is emerging. Is the United States reasserting dominance in its hemisphere? Under President Donald Trump, some analysts argue we may be witnessing a modern revival of the Monroe Doctrine. Tonight, we break it down. Number 1. The history that never left. The Monroe Doctrine was introduced in 1823. Its core message was simple: European powers must not interfere in the Americas. At first, it was defensive, a young United States warning against colonial expansion. But over time, it evolved. Throughout the 20th century, the doctrine was invoked to justify military interventions, political influence, economic leverage, Cold War containment strategies. The Caribbean became strategically essential because of proximity to the U.S. mainland, control of maritime routes, energy corridors, political influence across Latin America. Now in the 21st century, new global players are competing for influence. China has expanded infrastructure investments across Latin America. Russia maintains diplomatic relationships in parts of the region. For Washington, the Western Hemisphere remains a priority zone. The question is whether current U.S. actions represent continuity or escalation. Number 2. Venezuela. Oil, sanctions and power. Few nations illustrate the stakes more clearly than Venezuela. Once one of South America's wealthiest oil producers, Venezuela now faces economic collapse, hyperinflation and mass migration. Under the leadership of Nicolas Maduro, the country has endured years of sanctions and political isolation. During Trump's presidency, U.S. sanctions targeted oil exports, state-owned energy companies, financial networks, government officials. Why oil? Because oil equals leverage. When Venezuelan oil exports are restricted, global supply shifts. Energy markets fluctuate. Regional fuel chains are disrupted. For the United States, sanctions are framed as tools of accountability. Critics argue they can worsen humanitarian conditions. But strategically, energy policy is central to hemispheric influence. Control the energy lanes, influence the region. Number 3. Cuba. 90 miles that matter. Just 90 miles from Florida lies Cuba, a country deeply intertwined with U.S. political history. The U.S. embargo, in place for decades, has fluctuated across administrations. Under Trump, restrictions tightened significantly, travel limitations, financial controls, remittance caps, shipping restrictions. Cuba's economy depends heavily on tourism, imported fuel, remittances from abroad. When restrictions increase, ripple effects spread rapidly. Airlines adjust routes. Small businesses lose revenue. Fuel imports become strained. Supporters argue pressure encourages reform. Opponents argue sanctions disproportionately impact citizens. Regardless of perspective, Cuba remains a central piece in the regional puzzle. Number 4. Visa policy and Caribbean nations. Beyond oil and trade, immigration policy carries enormous weight in the Caribbean. For many families, U.S. visas represent educational opportunity, family reunification, business expansion, tourism industry access. Even procedural changes or increased vetting can create anxiety in island nations closely tied to the U.S. economy. Countries like Jamaica, the Bahamas, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Lucia rely heavily on remittances, travel connectivity, tourism flows, educational migration. When visa systems tighten, economies feel the pressure. Small islands are interconnected with U.S. policy in ways few other regions are. Number 5. The global competition factor. This isn't happening in isolation. China has invested billions in infrastructure projects across Latin America and the Caribbean. Ports, roads, telecommunications networks. Russia maintains strategic partnerships in select regions. From Washington's perspective, influence near U.S. borders carries national security implications. The Caribbean is not just regional, it's global. The modern geopolitical contest isn't only about military power. It's about trade routes, digital infrastructure, energy supply, diplomatic alliances. Influence is multidimensional. Number 6. Domestic U.S. politics. Back in Washington, debate is intense. Supporters of stronger regional enforcement argue, the hemisphere must remain secure. Energy independence is critical. Rival powers must be deterred. Critics argue, overreach risks destabilization. Economic pressure fuels migration. Diplomacy should take priority. Public opinion remains divided. Congressional discussions reflect broader political polarization. Foreign policy often becomes an extension of domestic politics. Number 7. Strategy or risk. Supporters say this approach protects U.S. national security, reinforces hemispheric leadership, sends a deterrent message to rivals. Critics warn, it could push Caribbean nations toward China. Economic hardship fuels instability. Heavy pressure strains alliances. History shows that foreign policy decisions ripple far beyond their immediate goals. The balance between strength and stability is delicate. Number 8. What happens next? The future depends on oil negotiations, diplomatic engagement, trade policy adjustments, immigration reforms. If tensions escalate, markets react. If diplomacy strengthens, regional cooperation may evolve. The Caribbean sits at a strategic crossroads. Closing, a region at the center. The Caribbean is not just a backdrop for global power politics. It is home to millions. Students, workers, families, entrepreneurs. Policy decisions in Washington ripple through island communities. The Monroe Doctrine shaped history once. Whether a modern version reshapes it again, remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. The Western Hemisphere is entering a new chapter. And the world is watching.